This is the story of a man named Stanley. Stanley worked for a company in a big building where he was employee number 427. Employee number 427's job was simple. He sat at his desk in room 427 and he pushed buttons on a keyboard. Orders came to him through a monitor next to his desk, telling him what buttons to push, how long to push them, and in what order. This is what employee 427 did every day of every month of every year. And although others might have considered it soul-rending, Stanley relished every moment that the orders came in, as though he had been made exactly for this job. And Stanley was happy. And then one day something very peculiar happened. Something that would forever change Stanley. Something he would never quite forget. He had been at his desk for nearly an hour when he realized that not one single order had arrived on a monitor for him to follow. No one had showed up to give him instructions, call a meeting, or even say hi. Never in all his years at the company had this happened, this complete isolation. Something was very clearly wrong. Shocked, frozen solid, Stanley found himself unable to move for the longest time. But as he came to his wits and regained his senses, he got up from his desk and walked out into the hallway.
Ja, välkomna till... Chilla. Välkommen till... Ner. Perfekt! Okej. Välkomna... Men ner. Idiotgrejer. Den här har varit lite trasig idag. Så. Sådär. Välkomna till The Stanley Parable, eller vad det heter. Och det här var på topp 10. Eller jag vet inte om det var topp 10, men det var på topplistan på ModDB på Half-Life 2 mod. Så jag tänkte jag skulle spela det. För folk skrev att det var riktigt bra och det var... Och så. Men den speglar ett annat rum. Det är ett annat rum. Okej. Då går vi ut.
Stanley decided to go to the staff lounge to check on his co-workers. He never functioned well by himself and constantly needed support and guidance from others. So the thought of total solitude was terrifying to him.
Är det här horror?
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left. This was not the correct way to the employee lounge, and Stanley knew it perfectly well. So he turned left at the first open door and walked back in the right direction.
Men om jag går rakt då? Jag testar bara gå rakt.
Stanley was so bad at following directions, it's incredible he wasn't fired years ago.
Men vad fan?
Maybe this is why everyone had left. No one wanted to be around someone as bad at listening as him.
Alltså,
Since he was walking into the middle of nowhere and thus ruining the entire story, Stanley decided that he would punish himself. So when he came to the elevator and the doors opened, he stepped inside and pushed the button to go up.
Nej! Fuck no, okej då. Nu ska vi inte göra som man säger, bara för att han ska bli lycklig. Yeah! Man vill ju inte förlora liksom. Nice. Vad fan är det här? Kom igen. Ah! Fan vad coolt.
It almost perplexed Stanley that he had actually gone and stepped into this metal trap. After all, it should have been no surprise that
Nej.
this thing would lead him to his death.
Nej, vad fan,
But he
skärp
thought to
dig.
himself, this is simply the price to pay for ruining a perfectly good story. So he resigned and willingly accepted his fate, the inevitable end toward which he had spent so long stumbling. Farewell, Stanley.
Nej men vad fan händer? Gå! Kom igen! Det är lugnt.
Farewell, Stanley, cried the narrator as he sent his subject down the conveyor belt and into the enormous metal jaws. In a single visceral instant,
Stanna.
Stanley was obliterated as the machine crushed every bone in his body, killing him instantly.
Vad fan? Gå. Oh yes! Fuck yeah!
It's a shame, then, that for all his work, it was such a meaningless victory for the narrator. Did he really think he would accomplish anything by murdering this disposable vessel?
Det var en tjej som snackade helt plötsligt, vad fan?
Every possible choice Stanley could make had been designed for him long before he ever set foot here. The narrator wanted to kill him. Stanley was already dead from the moment he hit start.
Exit. Yes.
There's no salvation for either of these two, I'm afraid. The narrator had as little power over Stanley as Stanley did over the paths that he walked. But listen to me.
Nej men vad
The
i
story is not over. You can
helvete.
still save these two. You can stop the program before they both fail.
Hur då?
Push escape and press quit. There's no other way to beat this game. As long as you move forward, you'll be walking someone else's path. Stop now, and it'll be your only true choice. Whatever you do, choose it. Don't let time choose for you.
Jag ska.
Don't let time...
Oj. Det gick åt helvete, eller? Vad fan?
When Stanley came to a set
Nu
of
går vi
two
till
columns,
vänster.
he entered the door on his left.
Japp. Jag tror det finns mer slut än ett. Jag tror det finns ganska många slut.
As Stanley entered the lounge, he was horrified to find not a single person here. He decided he would walk up to see his boss, hoping that he would find an answer there.
Fan vad rädd jag är.
Coming to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to
Okay.
his boss's office.
Vi ska göra som man säger då, eller? Eller?
Entering his manager's office, Stanley was once again stunned to discover not an indication of any human life. It was at this point that he began to feel dizzy and a little sick, and even thought he might pass out when suddenly he noticed a keypad next to the filing cabinet in the corner of his boss's office. Stanley had never seen this panel before and had no idea what combination of numbers would produce any result. In fact, only Stanley's boss knew this, since the panel withheld access to the boss's greatest, darkest secret, and so he had assigned the keypad a combination that only he could possibly know. The number of his freshman dorm number in college. 1957.
Alltså,
Of
lol.
course, Stanley couldn't possibly have known. Yet incredibly, by simply pushing random buttons on the
Right.
keypad, Stanley happened to input the correct code by sheer luck. Amazing. Stanley ventured forth into the newly opened passageway.
Men vad fan
As
vad
he
lol.
drew deeper into the bowels of the building, Stanley had no idea where he was or what this place held. And just as he began to think he might not discover a thing, he emerged into a long room to find rows and rows of monitors. Screens with
Vilken
a
var
number
min?
above it.
Där, 4-2.
Stanley noticed, however, that these were not random numbers, but the number of employees who worked in the building, his co-workers. Even his own number, 427, had a place on the wall. But why a setup so elaborate, he asked. Was this simple surveillance or something even more? And as if in answer to his question, the wall slid open before him, revealing the ultimate truth of the situation. An enormous control panel, Stanley discovered, but not one that controlled simple machinery. Buttons were labeled with emotions. Happy, sad. Levers and knobs controlled actions. Walking, eating, doing work, or watching TV. Every input on this device monitored not the functions of a machine, but of a human being. And the reality began to sink in. Stanley, like so many other people, reduced to images on a monitor, had been under someone's control, always at the mercy of this machine. Could this have been the only reason employee number 427 was content with his boring job? That a machine had altered his emotions to accept it blindly? He began to feel an unbridled rage, and at the peak of his anger, something happened. A spark. Stanley looked up and saw the generator overhead, still providing some small amount of power to the machine, keeping it alive. And knowing that this generator was all that kept the controls running, Stanley moved to the ladder in the back of the room and began to climb towards the rafters.
Men jag var väl här, okej. Whoop, nu gick det i alla fall att gå upp.
The higher Stanley climbed, the closer he felt to freedom, the further from enslavement.
Och här är 2 olika sätt att trycka också. Jag tycker vi sparar här. Sparar vi här. Save. För då kan vi gå tillbaka och så tar vi den gröna, eller jag vet inte, den gröna tar vi.
Oh, Stanley. You didn't just activate the controls, did you?
Och då?
After it kept you enslaved all these years, you go and you try to take control of the machine for yourself? Is that what you wanted?
Nej.
Control? Stanley. Stanley. I applaud your effort, I really do. But you need to understand, there's only so much that machine can do. You were meant to let it go, turn the controls off and leave. If you want to throw my story off track, you're going to have to do better than that.
Den var ju grön.
I'm afraid you don't have nearly the power you think you have. For example, and I believe you'll find this pertinent, Stanley suddenly realized that he had just initiated the network's emergency detonation system. In the event that this machine is activated without proper DNA identification, nuclear detonators are set to explode, eliminating the entire complex. How long until detonation then? Oh, let's make it say,
Oh shit! Nej!
Now,
Nej!
this is making things a little more fun, isn't it, Stanley?
Ner!
Go ahead. Play with those controls all you like. Real controls are where I'm sitting. Did you really ever believe you held any power?
Men sluta!
Did you not think I knew what I was doing?
Jag vet,
Should make sense, right? The timer, the nuclear detonation, the mysterious facility, it's all here. This is a video game. Except for one thing there, hero. You've got no weapon, no vehicle. You don't even know where you're going.
Tyst.
When you saw that timer, you just instinctively started trying to find an exit, didn't you?
Nej.
In fact, I bet you're still looking for a way out.
Nej.
I bet you're clicking on everything in this room, trying to open doors or vents or something and solve the puzzle.
Nej.
As though this game has a solution, as though it can be won. That timer is not a catalyst to keep things moving along. It's just set from the time we fade in until the moment I say, happily ever after.
sen, nu jävlar. Nu jävlar. Vad tyst det vart.
Blackness. Power gone. All alone.
Darkness. Hej då, idiot.
As he stepped through the door into the fresh outside air, a feeling of liberation rushed through Stanley's body. He had seen power. He had seen enslavement. And he had destroyed it. The underling was in control now. He had found his leading role. Stanley never discovered why everyone had gone missing, nor how and when he had come under the machine's control. But it didn't upset him terribly, because he knew that this was how things were meant to happen. All he felt was a delight unlike any he had ever known before. Never again would he follow someone else's orders without question. Never again would anyone tell Stanley where to go, what to do, or how to feel. No more bosses. No more instructions on a screen. Stanley decides for himself now. And he stepped out into the world, and he felt the cool breeze upon his skin, and Stanley was happy.
Nej, det är bara för bra. Det är nästan som man börjar gråta. Ja, det var riktigt bra. Det var riktigt bra spel. Riktigt bra. Det var lite konstigt att förstå vad man skulle göra dock. Men alltså det var simpelt. Det var inte så mycket man skulle göra. Man skulle mest gå typ. Men ändå så var det liksom epic. Så jävla epic. Nu ska vi kolla på music. French translation. Turkish translation. Nu ska vi se. Thank you for playing this video game. Thank you. Applåder. Fy fan vad bra det var. Ja. Ja. Men ja, gilla den här videon. Dela den med dina kompisar och subscribe till vår kanal. Ja. Hej då.